What happens when a high-profile rabbi, a relentless political commentator, and one of the most combative interviewers in the world all collide on live television? You get a debate so heated, so raw, that one of them completely loses control, and the entire exchange spirals into something he'll wish people forget. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now in this segment, Rabbi Shmuley doesn't just face one challenge. He's double-teamed by Cenk Uygur, known for his no-nonsense, fact-loaded style, and Piers, who's never afraid to push a guest into uncomfortable territory. From the very start, the tension is visible. The rabbi walks in ready to defend his position, but within minutes the conversation turns into a verbal crossfire. Every question gets sharper, every rebuttal cuts deeper, and the composure that should be his greatest strength starts slipping away. And here's the thing. When you're on a platform this big, every stumble is magnified. Viewers aren't just watching what you say, they're watching how you react under pressure. And in this case, the reaction spoke louder than the arguments. By the end, it wasn't just about who had the better facts. It was about who could keep their cool when the heat was on.
Yeah. Look, you just interviewed a terrorist, and she's one of the most vicious terrorists of my lifetime. These settlers are lunatic religious fundamentalists that believe in murdering Palestinians for God. It's an absurd interpretation of any religious document. The overwhelming majority of Jews, by the way, do not agree with them. They don't think that you have to murder Palestinians for God. So when you asked her that last question, it was actually very interesting what her answer was. You said, do you mind 20,000 children being killed? And she said, as long as they're teaching their children to hate Jews, she seemed to be justifying that we have to kill their children. So think about the absurd logic of that. Since they teach them to hate us, we murdered their children. Gee, I wonder why they hate you. Like, the fact that she can't even see that shows you how painfully stupid this terrorist is. So I'm done. You guys are way too polite to Israel. Israel is a terrorist state. I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested in supporting it. I'm not interested in having them steal more Arab land. And I said to you, Piers, a long time ago, that this was never about self-defense. This was about taking Gaza. Well, I was right. I've been proven right by Netanyahu and their terrorist government. I called them terrorists, and I said that they would kill more civilians than Hamas. Are you kidding me? They've now, get a load of this fact. Hamas killed 815 civilians on October 7th. Terrible. We've all condemned it 1,000 times. Now, Israel has killed 870 Palestinians under the age of 1. They have killed more Palestinian babies than Hamas killed civilians on October 7th. And every time it's a justification. No, we talked to God. God told us to steal Arab land. God told us to murder Arab children. What kind of sick state is this? When I saw her smiling, like you said, and smirking, now when I see a lot of these Israeli leaders, I feel like I'm looking at Germans telling us, no, it's okay. We can do this to the Jews. There's going to be no consequences. And their smugness partly, Piers, has to do with the fact that they think we own America. There's nothing you can do. We control the largest military in the history of the world. We can get them to do whatever we want because AIPAC has bought the entire U.S. government. And she's not wrong. She's not wrong. I mean, today Trump is talking about, you're not going to get the Epstein files. You're not going to get anything. We're occupied. We're all Palestinians now.
Rabbi Shmuley, I mean, when you listened to that interview with Daniela Weiss, what did you feel about it?
Piers, thank you for having me on. And having had a surprisingly civil debate at Oxford University with my brother Cenk, I'm actually going to excuse his hyperbole of calling Jews Nazis and stick to the facts because you were right, Piers. In your discussion with Daniela,
stop smearing Jews.
No, Cenk, please,
Germans.
Cenk, please don't. Okay, you're already interrupting me. Just be civil, please. We had a civil debate at Oxford. Let's try to continue. We shook hands afterward. Hundreds of thousands of people said how much they enjoyed watching us shake hands. Let's be human a little bit. I'm going to do what you said, Piers, and stick to the facts. Number one, Cenk just said that Israel killed so many more civilians that were killed on October 7th. 45,000 Britons died in the Battle of Britain when the Luftwaffe and Hermann Goering, bombed London, Northampton to smithereens. But Churchill killed 700,000 German children. He killed 3 million German civilians. That was terrible. But here's my question to you, Piers. Outside of Parliament is a giant statue of Churchill as the greatest statesman in the history of Britain. Was Churchill a war criminal, yes or no?
No, Churchill wasn't a war criminal. In fact, Matthew, I saw you shaking your head.
Okay. He wasn't. Okay. You said facts. You said facts.
Well, hang on. If you're going to make statements like Churchill,
45. Wait.
I think your numbers aren't correct
you can
about
expand.
the number of civilians who died. Never mind anything else.
Yes, they are. There were 3 million German civilians killed by Britain and by the United States. There were 70,000 Japanese killed on a single day in Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Half of them were children. 35,000. Was Harry Truman a war criminal? Was Roosevelt a war? If you are prepared to say, Piers, based on facts and based on what Cenk just said, that the proportion of civilians to combatant deaths determines whether you're a war criminal. And by the way, Churchill killed 5 civilians for every 1 German combatant. The United States in Fallujah killed 4 civilians in Fallujah in Iraq for every 1 terrorist Iraqi combatant. So was George W. Bush a war criminal? Was Tony Blair a criminal? If you're prepared to at least be consistent and say that yes,
I think Bush and Blair were war criminals.
3 million was Churchill. Okay, do you think that Winston Churchill was a war criminal? It's a yes or no question.
No.
The same way you put it to Danielle, yes or no?
Churchill, well, let me let...
So Churchill can kill 3 million
All right, you've
Germans,
asked a question.
okay?
You've asked a question. Matthew.
What we just witnessed wasn't a polite exchange of ideas. It was an unfiltered, unapologetic confrontation that tore the mask off decades of carefully packaged hypocrisy surrounding US foreign policy, Israel, and the question of accountability. Cenk Uygur didn't tiptoe around it. He didn't dress it up in diplomatic language. He said what so many people are afraid to say out loud, that what's happening in Gaza has nothing to do with defense anymore. It's about domination, land, power, and yes, bloodshed. And when you strip away the political spin and look at the numbers as they are, no sugarcoating, no filters, the reality is staggering. On October 7th, Hamas killed 815 civilians, a horrific act that drew instant global condemnation as it should have. But Israel's so-called response has now killed over 870 babies under the age of 1. Babies, not militants, not fighters, infants. And that's only part of the toll. What makes it even more chilling is the justification we keep hearing. That if Palestinians teach their children to hate, then those children are somehow fair targets. Let that sink in for a moment. That's not defense. That's not strategy. That's collective punishment. That's vengeance dressed up as policy. And when someone like Daniela Weiss smirks her way through questions about the deaths of 20,000 children, brushing it off with a casual theological shrug, it's no wonder Cenk called it what it is, terrorism. Enter Rabbi Shmuley. But instead of grappling with the moral catastrophe in front of him, he retreated to the oldest form of deflection in the book, historical whataboutism. Churchill, World War II, Hiroshima. It's the same tired tactic we've seen 100 times, drown the present in the past, and hope no one notices the evasion. As if citing events from 80 years ago somehow excuses what's happening right now. But here's the truth. No matter how many times you invoke Churchill or Truman, none of it changes the images coming out of Gaza today. You cannot hide behind old wars to dodge accountability for new ones. And you especially cannot wave away thousands of dead children with a shrug and a line about others doing it too. This moment makes one thing painfully clear. We've reached a turning point in how this conversation is happening. The usual talking points are failing. People are seeing the footage, hearing the testimonies, counting the bodies, and they're asking the hard questions, even if those in power refuse to answer them. The reality is blunt. Israel's far-right government is acting with impunity, bankrolled by billions in US taxpayer dollars and protected by a political class too afraid or too bought to speak the truth. The cost? Tens of thousands of lives. Entire neighborhoods turned to rubble. An entire generation of Palestinians growing up under siege, under bombs, and under the crushing weight of global indifference. Cenk calling Israel a terrorist state might shock some viewers. But what should really shock you is how few leaders are even trying to prove him wrong. We've moved past the point where this is about political allegiance. This is now about what you are willing to accept in your name, with your money and under your flag. So ask yourself, If this were happening anywhere else in the world, would we still be silent? Would we still be making excuses? Would we still be funding it? Because silence is complicity, and history has a long, brutal record of showing us exactly where complicity leads. Let's get back to the video.
I think it's a completely coherent and fair question. It's about means and ends. Is the means justified to achieve a given end? For what it's worth, I think that consequentialist approach is legitimate. I think that Truman was justified in the atomic bombs. I say that reluctantly, but I think there would have been many more deaths had the Second World War not been brought to an end in that way. I know some people will disagree with that position. However,
okay, so you're one of the most fair person. Wait a second. So you're one of the most fair person that I've ever spoken to about on this show. All I'm saying is, let's be clear. Piers, God weeps for every Palestinian child, the 20,000 children. I don't know if it's 20,000, but even if it is, weeps for every one. One was too many. But every Arab child is the equal of a Jewish child. But whose responsibility is it? Who builds? I live in a community here in New York, New Jersey. There is no army base near me. Why are the Hamas headquarters in nurseries? Why does Hamas use these children to die so that you will then point the finger? Now, even Hitler did not do that. The German military headquarters were not built in kindergartens. And let me say one final thing, Piers, if I may. Piers, you know what struck me about your interview with Daniela Weiss? You did not once ask her, what do the people of Gaza want? I don't care what Piers Morgan wants. I don't care what Daniela Weiss wants. I don't care what Cenk Uygur wants. I don't care what Rabbi Shmuley wants.
To lead.
The people of Gaza don't speak for them in the same way I won't. They have not had a vote since 2005 when Hamas took the leaders of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, and threw their opponents off the roofs and killed them. Then Hamas abolished all elections. Now, I want the people of Gaza to vote. Do you want to remain in that tiny hovel where you don't have a backyard, where any money that's given to Hamas, if it's rebuilt, will be, again, it'll go to tunnels? Remember that the Hamas got triple the Marshall aid per capita per Palestinian, and they didn't build one bomb shelter, they didn't build one school, they didn't build one university, they just built tunnels and rockets. Ask the people so Piers, let me ask you, why did you ask
may I say to the rabbi, forgive me for persisting here,
decide where they want to live.
But the rabbi did say, I think legitimately, that he had been interrupted and he didn't like it. I was halfway through the point that I was making, if I may say so, when you jumped in. I said that I thought Truman was justified. That's fine. In ending the Pacific War. I think Churchill was justified in trying to end the war in Europe. What I don't understand, and I think a lot of people who are instinctively pro-Israel do not understand, are where are the sunlit uplands on the other side of the evisceration of Gaza? I've been told by senior Israeli officials, confidentially, that young Gazans, Palestinians and people across the Middle East are being radicalized, that these dead Hamas fighters are being replaced at a rate of 5 to 1. This isn't going to affect Israel for the next 5 months or 5 years, but for the next 50 years. And how on earth is flattening Gaza going to help the protection of Israel when their funders are in Tehran?
No, I agree.
The image, and let me just make one final point. In the medium term, I say to the rabbi, and I say this with great sincerity, the image of Israel, I don't want to superficialize it, but the brand of Israel, that liberal democracy in a tough neighborhood, which sits unconsciously behind Western support and has done since the Second World War, has been obliterated, shattered into a million pieces. The next generation of American leaders are going to grow up where the most salient image in their minds is not going to be the Holocaust, as it is for our generation. It's going to be emaciated Gazan children dying in their thousands, being starved via a blockade. I say to you, I understand why Israelis and Jews rallied around Netanyahu after October the 7th. Who wouldn't? After an atrocity of that kind. But I believe you've been goaded into an overreaction that will reverberate through history of great strategic disadvantage to a country I want to do well.
I see you.
All right, and before I let Rabbi Shmuley respond, before you respond, Rabbi Shmuley, I just wanted to pick you up on the statistics that you regaled at the start of that, which I think you said that the British killed 3 million German civilians, including 300,000 children. Is that what you said?
A 5 to 1 combatant to civilian
just to be
ratio.
clear, you said 3 million, and of which 300,000 were children. That's what you said, right?
Right.
It's
the British decimated Cologne, they decimated Berlin, they decimated Hamburg, they decimated Dresden. In Dresden, they killed 30,000 in one night, etc.
Let me finish my point. You were completely wrong. You were wildly exaggerating the number of civilians killed by the British bombing campaigns, the Allied bombing campaigns. It's estimated between 350 and 500,000 German civilians were killed in total by Allied bombing in World War II. And I would also add this. At the end of
Okay, so I said 700,000.
Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. So it was a sixth of what you said, in fact. But the wider point is we brought in the Geneva Convention at the end of World War II specifically to address the issues of mass civilian casualties in World War II. The UK signed up to that. Most countries of the world signed up to the Geneva. Israel is a signatory to the Geneva Convention, and yet it breaches regularly the Geneva Convention, including, many believe, what they're now doing as a government in Gaza.
You saw it, unfiltered, undeniable, and impossible to spin away. The very moment Rabbi Shmuley was pushed beyond the comfort zone of talking points, his composure cracked wide open. And this wasn't just your average heated exchange. This was a rare unscripted glimpse into what happens when the defenders of Israel's most controversial actions are forced to explain what, deep down, cannot be morally justified. For those of you who've been following our coverage over the past few weeks, this scene fits a disturbing pattern we've been documenting in real time. Every time someone from the pro-Israel camp is confronted with cold, hard facts, numbers that can't be disputed, videos that can't be unseen, stories of human suffering that cut straight to the core, the response is never real accountability. It's not empathy. Instead, what we get is the same tired formula. Spin the narrative, inflate the rhetoric, and deflect the blame onto anyone but themselves. And in this interview, the playbook was on full display. Cenk Uygur started measured, deliberate, calmly laying out the reality as it is, not as propaganda paints it. But the weight of what he was describing, the sheer scale of the suffering, the loss of innocent life, gave his words an undeniable emotional punch. It was the kind of force you can't fake, the kind that comes from knowing you're describing something truly horrifying, and knowing that the world is watching. Let's be brutally honest here. What's unfolding isn't just a conflict, and it's not some tragic accident of war brushed off as collateral damage. When the number of children killed passes 20,000, and that figure is now being discussed openly in global forums, we've crossed into far darker territory. By every legal, moral, and human standard, that's not just warfare, that's genocide. But instead of facing that reality head-on, Rabbi Shmuley chose one of the oldest and most dangerous dodges in political debate, historical whataboutism. Rather than address what's happening in Gaza today, he reached for Churchill, World War II, and Hiroshima, attempting to draw a false moral equivalence between the Allied bombings of Nazi Germany and the deliberate devastation in Gaza right now. It was a move so disconnected from the current facts that it didn't just miss the point, it undermined his entire argument. It came off as absurd, desperate, and frankly offensive. And that's when something rare happened. Piers Morgan, yes, Piers, who I'm not often in the habit of praising, did exactly what the moment demanded. He didn't let the inflated claims slide. He didn't move on for the sake of civility. He stopped the exchange cold and fact-checked the numbers right there on air. Rabbi Shmuley had claimed the British killed 3 million German civilians during World War II, including 300,000 children. But Piers came armed with the actual historical record, and it wasn't even close. The real number? Somewhere between 350,000 and 500,000 total civilian deaths, not the millions Shmuley was tossing around to bolster his point. In that instant, the credibility gap was laid bare. When you have to exaggerate history to defend the present, it tells the audience everything they need to know about the strength or weakness of your case. That single exchange told you everything you needed to know. If you have to bend the truth, or outright invent it, just to build a moral defense for actions that look like war crimes, your argument has already collapsed under its own weight. And Piers Morgan's closing point cut right to the heart of the bigger picture. For decades, Israel's political brand was carefully crafted. The lone liberal democracy in a hostile region, a moral force surrounded by chaos, the underdog worth rooting for. It was a narrative that won sympathy, support, and billions in aid from the West, especially from the United States. But that brand has been shattered, maybe beyond repair, because for the next generation, the defining image of Israel won't be Holocaust memorials or stories of resilience. It will be emaciated children pulled from rubble. It will be hospitals reduced to smoldering ruins. It will be mass graves in Gaza, dug under the eyes of a world that claimed to value human rights. And here's the thing, they did this to themselves. October 7th was a tragedy, yes. It could have been met with a targeted, proportional response aimed squarely at Hamas leadership. Instead, it became something else entirely, something far more dangerous and morally bankrupt. Entire neighborhoods flattened into dust, food and water supplies cut off to millions. Aid convoys struck before they could deliver relief. Civilians turned into bargaining chips in a geopolitical game. And every time these realities are brought up, the response is the same predictable list. What about Hamas? What about the tunnels? What about 1945? As if repeating history lessons or pointing at your enemy's sins somehow erases your own. Let's be clear. None of that justifies the intentional, repeated, large-scale killing of civilians, and it certainly doesn't excuse the way Rabbi Shmuley twisted the blame, shifting it from those dropping the bombs onto the very people burying their dead. That's not defense. That's deflection. And the world is starting to see it for exactly what it is. That's not just wrong, it's appalling. It's victim blaming on a geopolitical scale. Saying Hamas hides behind children doesn't make killing those children acceptable. Saying Gaza is run by extremists doesn't give anyone a moral pass to level an entire city and reduce its population to body counts and statistics. And this is exactly why moments like this interview matter. This is why pushback is essential. Because if these narratives go unchallenged, if no one speaks up, they don't just survive, they spread. They become the default way the story is told. Before long, we're rationalizing mass death while pretending it's diplomacy, dressing up atrocities in the language of strategy and self-defense. So credit where it's due. Cenk Uygur stayed locked in, refusing to get lost in the detours and historical smokescreens. And yes, even Piers, a man I rarely find myself praising, stepped up when it counted and cut through the noise. In times like these, telling the truth feels almost like rebellion. But that's exactly where we are. The bigger question now is whether the public is starting to wake up. Are we witnessing the first real shift in opinion on something that's been treated as untouchable for decades? Are more people finally looking at the evidence and realizing the official story doesn't match the reality on the ground? Because if seeing this, the numbers, the images, the moral gymnastics, doesn't shake people out of complacency, I honestly don't know what will. So let's keep this conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear what you think. While you're there, hit that like button to help this video reach more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more of the raw, unfiltered breakdowns we bring you here. Stay informed, stay bold, and I'll see you in the next one.